us to do a quick few comments on this, and the packet has a lot of information, and if needed, I can pull some of that up on the screen. So I first want to see whether there is anyone in the attendees who would like to make a public comment. You can say as much or as little as you want about the project. We have the information and we sent you questions. We can follow up on some of those questions as needed. So Shannon, you have the floor.
Yep, so I didn't prepare a whole presentation, but I do have the questions that were sent, so I was hoping to address some of those. I know I did mention a little bit about the time frames at the town council meeting. So I'm happy to just dive right in and answer questions and do whatever you need me to.
So what I might want to do, and let me just ask the committee members, I put into our packet the presentation the regional school committee received, as well as the accounting. So this is Amherst is part of a district, and Joe and Tom, I don't know whether you got, and others had a chance to see that. So I'm just going to look to the committee. Do people want a context on what we're talking about? Should I share some of them up on the screen until we jump into questions, or is everyone comfortable that I mean, this is about a $10 million authorization for a new middle school roof, where MSBA will be paying a share of it, and then the town share will be determined by the regional agreement. So the Amherst share of what remains after the town. Tom.
Thank you. It would be helpful for me. I had to miss the last meeting at which this was discussed. So if it could be done quickly, I'll come up the learning curve fast with you.
Okay, so let me just, I think.
And I could just say a few things too, just to recap. My apologies. I thought like everybody knew it all or had attended X, Y, and Z. So the middle school roof has we've applied with MSBA to repair the roof through the accelerated roof repair program. We've been applying for many years and have not been approved. Now we were this year invited to the schematic design phase of the project. We've never gotten this far before. And now that we're in this process, we had to submit this formal design plan to MSBA. And at this point, our OPM has stated they've never seen a project make it this far without receiving MSBA approval, knock on wood. And the MSBA will be voting on this officially. It's October 28th or October 29th, one of those 2 days. I have to look it up on the calendar, but it's either one of those days. And once it's approved, well, part of the approval process is we had to vote a debt authorization for the full cost of the project, which includes contingencies. And MSBA has already assigned us a reimbursement rate of 61.95%. It is important, though, when you look at the budget, that you can't take the total budget and multiply it by 61.95% because there are some costs in there that are ineligible for reimbursement. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're doing the math, and it'll give you the total dollar amount that is eligible for reimbursement on there. And then you just subtract the difference for the total district share. So at this point, the school committee had voted on it on September 23rd, I believe, which then that vote was sent to each of the member towns. Shutesbury voted September 30th and passed the debt authorization. Tomorrow night is Pelham's vote on the debt authorization. Leverett, I don't believe has a date yet, although I do remember seeing an email last week I'd have to go back to, and Amherst has not voted yet. So there is 60 days once the school committee votes that all four towns should vote. If not, it's considered a pocket approval per our regional agreement. So that's where we stand. The Amherst Town Council had referred this to the Finance Committee, and I know that there's been some questions. So I'm here to help answer those about the project and finance-wise.
Thank you, Shannon. And Joe and Tom, just so you know, the meeting that we were going to have on this last week didn't happen, so you really haven't missed this.
Okay.
But Shannon, I did can everyone see my screen? I just want to, I think, so I
I
did
can
a
see it.
quick looking at the budget, and this was the 10 million is the total budget, the 10 point, whatever. And then the MSBA, as Shannon said, they put into the spreadsheet, and it's on our document, that they'll only pay up to a certain amount, and that's their percentage. So subtracting that, you get what the region share would be. And then way down, I did a quick look at, under the regional agreement, our share, and Andy or Shannon can explain this, is determined by the EQV, or the value of the town's properties, and that comes to about 78% based on the FY24. So the Amherst share of the part of this authorization that's not being paid by MSBA would be in this $3 million range. And I'm just rounding them because this is an up to budget. And the only other thing I might add, and then Andy, I will call on you, the school building is also being supported by MSBA. And the way MSBA pays is it doesn't give you everything up front. It pays you as the expenses are incurred based on their share, so that although we're not expecting the district will pay 10 million, the authorization is for the full amount. And then the MSBA money flows in. So I'm gonna call on people. Andy, your hand is up, and then we can go into the questions that people asked. Andy?
Yeah, well, you have that on the screen. I might point out one thing, and then I had another question of Shannon. But the 78, the amount that we would have as a share is actually a share of debt. So it's not that you pay it all at once. It's paid over time. And unfortunately, we don't have the finance department staff. We can probably ask to run a estimate, but it would be paid over a number of years, and it would affect the future capital budgets for each of the years by that amount. But it wouldn't be coming out, it wouldn't be all at once. The question I had of Shannon, however, is that you mentioned Pelham in a meeting tomorrow. Who is the meeting with? I mean, it's not a special town meeting. Is it select board or?
It's their fall town meeting. So
Oh,
they'll be voting on it tomorrow night.
have you seen any recommendation come from the select board or the finance committee to the town meeting?
No, I have not. At least it wasn't sent to me. I did talk to John Tricky from Pelham this morning.
So Andy, and everyone can, if any of these statements, people want more explanation. So Mandy.
Yeah, I want to say to Shannon before I ask my questions, I'm not sure you can answer any of them because they're more about what our share is and how it fits into our capital lines. So I apologize for that, Shannon, but I'm hoping you can give me some idea. I went back to last year's Four Towns meeting. It's the one I had easily accessible that had a capital budget debt projected for the region from December of 2024. And it set forth the debt schedule or a projected debt schedule, and that had the middle school roof debt for the total region, right? Not split out necessarily between Amherst and all. On that schedule, was that based on this estimate or the $3 million debt that had already been authorized?
So the original debt assessment with the projected out years was based off of the 3 million, not that we didn't have this figure at the time that that was created. So, but that $3 million was in that projection for the out years.
Okay, so the middle school roof debt that had an FY say 25 projection of 66,000 for principal and interest up to an FY 33 projection of 260,000 for principal and interest is based on 3 million in borrowing, not 4 million in borrowing.
Yes, I don't have those figures in front of me to confirm what line, but yes, it
Yeah.
was included in there based on the 3 million, not the 4 million.
Okay, excellent. So I'm just trying to figure it all out as I go through. And so I guess this is then, I went down to our capital improvement plan that has actual and projected debt schedules on page 29. And that one just has a regional school district debt assessment with an estimation. It goes forward to 800,000 a year starting in FY 27. So it at least in that schedule, even though that schedule doesn't really balance, would include some of the higher years from this debt, but not necessarily other debt that is projected. As I'm trying to figure out how it fits into our schedule. So I guess the question I have for you, Shannon, looking at all of that is, where is the debt projection for other projects sitting with the region at this point? You know, that schedule that was presented to us last year, which presumably we'll see another one in December of this year, was a lot. What other projects is the region looking at that might add on to region debt as we think about managing capital costs?
So that's a really good question, and I am in the process with our director of operations to put together that plan and the 10-year plan, which will be a draft document in December. But there are some projects that will have to be worked on, and I can pull up a little bit of what I talked with them about today, but it's not finalized. And I guess what I want to say is that it's in the works and it's going to be a refreshed capital book because uh, we are both newer in this position, but now we have about a year and under the belt, and the transfer from our predecessors to now is, we're in full effect. So I feel this year we'll have a lot more confidence in what we're bringing forth because it wasn't something that was left on the table, and we know a little bit more about it. But I'm not prepared to fully present on that at this time.
That's understandable, but thank you for that answer. I'm not sure I have any other questions at this time, Kathy.
Okay, and so just, I mean, Shannon, we can go over some of the others. So I just wanted to underscore for both Joe and for Tom, but then we're going to need to be writing up a report for the council. There was an earlier debt authorization of 3 million. And so once this goes through, that earlier one will be rescinded. But on our, as Mandy pointed out, we've already based some out-year projections for the debt we're carrying. So this is not a full new debt. It's some net difference. And as Andy pointed out, we don't yet know what the debt service is for that, it's more money than originally planned. So we don't know what's going to happen to that line. And this is not dissimilar from when we're looking at other capital projects where we know the total amount, but until we get the financing, and are we talking about 10-year, 20-year, and our bond people give us a number, So, but we're voting on the total amount rather than the line item, which will eventually be debt service. So this, I just did a summary here, and Shannon had explained during the regional meeting that not wanting to rescind the 3 million until this had gone through all the towns, that we had a replacement for it because it's sitting on the books. Is that correct, Shannon, that you're holding the vote on that rescission?
Yes, yep. With the intent to rescind it, we have, if this is voted and approved, I don't see why we wouldn't. I know that was a question. I feel like it would be our good faith to rescind it. I'm not sure why we would keep it. So,
Kathy, I know that a couple meetings ago, we talked about kind of a $3 million sort of override for the roads, like construction and things like that. Would these all be rolled in together? These like,
No, because this actually isn't, that's the interest, the way the regional school is financed, it's all on debt authorization, so
Okay.
it's not an upfront payment,
Okay.
so this would be paid by issuing a bond.
Yeah,
And,
okay.
and then over time, we would be paying this. So Mandy's question on, do we have a capital budget for the town of Amherst that has a line item called regional schools?
Right,
And
okay.
it already incorporated the projected debt service for the 3 million,
Mhm.
with it jumping up in FY 27. So that number will be larger now,
Gotcha.
than
Okay.
it was, and then in out years. And this project is due to happen this summer, to be finished. So it will be, the incurring of the debt will happen, in this fiscal year, in terms of when we would start having to be paying it off, because we don't have to pay it back until we've incurred it.
And Shannon, this would probably be a relatively short-term note. I would assume it's a small amount of money, $3 million. I mean, it was under 10 years. Is that
yeah,
pretty good?
so we have, or I have options with a
Okay.
very long email and a meeting with our financial advisors to discuss those.
Okay.
But we haven't figured out exactly what one we're going to go with yet.
Thank you.
And just so, according to what we've heard from Paul, the town's finance director will be starting next week. So we'll also have a finance director that Sharon will have a counterpart in the town of Amherst, to be talking back and forth on these issues on how does this roll out to the Amherst capital budget.
And that's Sean, right?
Yeah, Sean is, that is our person, and we're, as he said, we're eagerly awaiting his arrival. But that's due to happen. So any
And
other, yeah, go
and
ahead.
I will just note, when talking with Pelham today, they're planning on using free cash, I don't know if it's free cash, but cash that they have set aside for region capital. And so I talked a little bit with our financial advisors, is what does that mean for what we're taking out in the vote? I don't have the answers to those questions, but that's also why I can't give a definitive answer, because that was a new thing that was just thrown in, that I'm talking with them about.
And Shannon, is that just because it's just a smaller dollar amount to them? That they
I
can
think
pay it out?
said that they've been saving for this.
Okay.
So I guess that's how they planned with their finances. I don't really know how or why or when that happened, but they were putting funds away.
Mandy?
A couple of questions and a couple of comments. So to Joe's question about how does it fit in, we would the plan in this year's capital improvement plan for Amherst has region debt payments paid for out of our capital funding, not out of debt exclusions or overrides or savings or anything. It would be fit within that 10% levy of the levy that we do every year. That projects that regional school district debt for FY26, at least I'm just reading from the current capital improvement plan, is 485,000, and then for FY27 to 31 is up at 800,000. To give you an idea, the last December's capital budget from the regional school, their debt projections had the highest number for the middle school roof in 1 year was 359,000 total. I'm not sure. Amherst would have been about three quarters of that. So that 800 just for the middle school roof, not any of the other debt that we're obligated to already pay because we've approved for the region. So that 800,000 that's in that capital improvement plan might cover it all, but it might not, depending on what comes through. And that's where our lack of a finance director in Amherst is hurting us for this conversation. The question I have for Shannon is, what term lengths are you looking at for this? You know, are we looking at anywhere from 5 years to 20 years to 30 years to if, you know, things like that? And how does that change? Do you have an idea of how that changes what those principal and interest payments overall are in a year? Like, what's the absolute highest the entire region would be facing in a year?
Um, I'm gonna see if I can pull some of that up. I will say, hold on one second. I have a meeting on Thursday to discuss this a little bit more at length. Let me just see if I can pull. For some reason, when I'm maximizing my screen, it's covering up everything else, and now I can't see you all. I will also say, according to our regional agreement, because I went back and looked at this, the maximum term is 20 years.
Okay.
It cannot go above there, so it would certainly be less than that because that's our requirement.
You know, I'm thinking, Mandy, if she can't find it right now, if she could just, I'll do a draft report and we can just plug a range in because we don't, that mainly, well, I think everyone on this committee knows that range, uh, the shorter the range, the more principal we have to pay back. So spreading out longer means that line that we're looking at is lower, but it means the total amount we're paying is higher. So that's the judgment call on how far we go out. And given tight budgets, sometimes we go out longer so we can ease the impact on next year's budget in the first 5 years worth because it spreads it out over a longer period of time. But that's also a judgment call on what other things. It sounds like I don't even know how you could have one town, Shannon, for example, saying we're going to pay our whole share up front and then debt service out the other town. So that would be something I don't even want to try to think of how that might work.
Yeah, I'm confused by that too. And does that mean that they have to pay a piece of interest still? I'm not sure. So I'm going to talk to our financial advisors about that piece. I'd be happy to share. I could email the options over if that's easier as well. I can do that after the fact.
Yeah, and as I said, I'm just going to put it as a line that it's to be determined, and here's the range. And you've just given us it can't be any more than 20 years. You know, so there's something up to 20 years.
Yeah, I would just like a range simply so that when the council asks us how much might this take from our typical yearly allocation, we can give them a range of up to this much, probably not more than that, but we don't know yet because it's my understanding, Shannon, that we don't have any say in what the school chooses with that. Once we authorize the debt, you choose, we don't have a
Right.
say. So
Right, it's up to the district. But I mean, we would do what makes sense, what's best financially. We're not looking to make terrible decisions here.
Right.
You know, and the other, we had a question during the budget cycle, Shannon, that I don't think we ever got complete answer to. It looked like you always debt finance every capital project, even, you know, the 5,000. I think Mandy, you asked that question. Was this just, you know, this was the practice? Because it doesn't necessarily make sense to finance 5,000 as opposed to just pay it. It makes sense to finance the million. So that probably all plays into what that debt service line is. And so I don't want to even guess what computations go into that. Since when we get, Joe and Tom, when we get it, meaning when Amherst gets it, we get, here's the Amherst share of the regional debt. We're not talking about the individual pieces of it. You know, we're sort of authorizing that. So what Mandy's reading off of is the line item for region going out multiple years.
Right, but I was just saying to Shannon, and I could be totally off here, but the other town share is a smaller dollar amount where,
Oh, yeah.
right.
You know, we're,
So maybe they have enough in reserves if it's only, 300, 400, 500,000, and maybe that's something for them that they could just pay up front.
Right.
So-
You know, so
Yeah.
I did the 78% that's Amherst, and that's absolutely right. The other three altogether have 22, and then that varies by town. So any other questions on this? The one thing that I wanted people to know, it came up a little at the council meeting. The in for I guess in some rationale that makes sense to the MSBA, the roof over the auditorium was not old enough for them to say, let's do the roof, you know, and accept us in. So the roof of the auditorium is not included in the total. And Shannon has a estimate of what the auditorium roof might be, and it is leaking, as I understand it. There's been some patchwork on it. So that might be a separate request, not related to this, that comes to Amherst, and we could potentially look at the free cash when we get a determination in the fall. Because if it were to be included, we would have to do this fiscal year on it to make the project whole. So that's a pure question mark at this point, but it's a part of the roof that wasn't part of the estimate, the $10 million estimate. Mandy?
Yeah, while we have Shannon here, just one other question and, sort of confirmation. It's my understanding that if the school district accepts the MSBA money, it obligates the building to be used for educational purposes for 20 years. So I guess I want to make sure that that's correct, so that by authorizing in some sense this debt, we're accepting that the building needs to be used for educational uses for 20 years. And then I guess I'd like a little more clarification on what constitutes an educational use. So I'll give you just three examples. Obviously, keeping it as the middle school does. Right now, that building has the district offices in it. If it is only occupied by district offices and, say, the recreation department of Amherst, would that constitute educational uses? If you know, I know you might not know. And then would renting out the building to, say, a charter school constitute an educational use? Just as random examples.
So I talked to MSBA on the phone about this, and they had stated it was the expectation, that was the specific word that they used, expectation, that it will be used for 20 years. If we were to do anything different, before any decision is made, MSBA has to be contacted first, and they would make a determination if they were to recapture any funding. But what the educational programming, or when they would recapture or would not recapture, they did not provide or go into or respond to my what if scenarios. So I don't want to say yes or no to your questions when because ultimately they have to decide that. And I wish I had more to give you on that topic, but I don't. Um, our OPM had stated they have never seen MSBA like directly say to a school district, you owe us $2 million back, but rather what they have seen is if you have another project with MSBA, they reduce their grant amount on that project. But not that you actually physically give them the funds back. That's at least what our OPM has experienced.
Thank you. Can I just ask a clarifying question? When you say the expectation is that it will maintain this use, does that mean they expect it to maintain the middle school use for the current actual use for 20 years, not just an educational use?
It didn't, I don't know that clarifying
Okay.
question.
Okay, thank you.
I just think and if we are doing anything different before, whatever ideas we have, we call MSBA.
Thank you.
I
I just want to say that your advisors were pretty strong on Mandy, we don't have a concrete answer, but any kind of use probably would qualify, and they've never actually seen a situation where the entire use was terminated, period. And and so that MSBA, when they came in, this determination that I don't know whether they have, it has to be 25 years or older rather than it's leaking and in really bad shape, but I won't question that wisdom of the MSBA. But so I don't think I actually don't think we should press on the question very much if our intention is to move forward with this, and it's leaking pretty badly throughout the building. So one other thing for those of you, I attended the presentation, otherwise I would not know any of this. But the details of what is the plan is, there's some equipment on the roof, there's drainage systems on where so it's not just the roof, but it's a whole drainage system that will move the water away from the building in a different design than currently in the building. So it's not purely like when I redo the roof of my house, which is just putting some more slate tiles on it. There's a fair amount of engineering and redesign that's going on to make this roof a much better long-term roof than it has been. Andy.
You had several comments made along the way about about continued use of the building for educational purposes. And I think that some of that has come up in various contexts when I know that John Turkey in Fort Towns meetings over the years has been pressing very hard on something that we talked about and then has sort of been set aside, and that is moving the middle school 2 years into an expanded building at the high school, or taking advantage of just the falling enrollment to fit it in. And that's why I was curious whether there had been a recommendation from their finance committee or their select board, since that has been an issue that they've been raising for some time. I think that I've heard the same question raised from a couple of people who in Amherst who raised that question about whether, given falling enrollment, it really makes sense to tie yourself up in that way. I understand the problem with the crisis in the roof creates a dilemma to have this conversation at this time. But I think that we do need to at least recognize that the issue is there. And the other question that I had asked, and I think I posted to you, Kathy, and I never got a response back, was about whether the sixth grade, what are the enrollment projections for the elementary schools, and whether there's a capacity to change and have the sixth grades stay with the elementary schools and not move it out to a separate academy or whatever you want to call it. So I think that there's that series of questions that we at least need to recognize that are out there in various places.
And Shannon might want to speak to the sixth grade boob. My understanding is it is still planned to have the sixth grade in the middle school in September. So Shannon, there's the question has been raised about that, but I think it's going to be discussed either this week or next week at the school committee yet again. So Shannon, but I think the superintendent still has that as the path.
Yes, the plan is to still move the sixth graders to the middle school. Um, Kathy was on the meeting with Dinesco when we talked to them about, is it a possibility that we could keep the sixth graders in the new school and at Cracker Farm? Um, right now we have some flexibility with spacing for K to 5. But if it was K to 6, we don't have any flexibility. And our capacity for the building was for 600 students. In fiscal year 28, we're about 10, 15 students shy with K to 5 in that new building of that capacity that it was originally meant for. So I don't think we currently have the space to do that. But I'm sure the superintendent's not here, but she can speak more to that if she at our school committee meeting or at another meeting.
And part of what's happening is there's been an increase in enrollment that wasn't anticipated in the elementary school. So, I mean, Andy, you had a statement of a continuous enrollment decline. That picture's a little less clear right now. And it's partly because Amherst is building. And so there are some families that have come in, but at the elementary level, they had some additional students they hadn't been anticipating. And that they're now in the pipeline. Yep.
Yep. Yeah, there's a bubble that is growing upwards that you'll see in our projections.
Yeah, it's difficult, but we are making a 20-year projection. That's what makes it so hard.
Yep. Mandy.
More of a statement, and I know it can't change. I listened to the school committee presentation on this too, and they had a lot of questions about the solar readiness and solar and all. And I understand why the district might not be choosing to ask the towns to put solar on the roof now while we're doing the roof, and also the cost concerns as to why the district might be going with, I don't even know the terminology with what MSBA said, that small little plot that would be solar ready, but the rest of the building not. I don't even know how to describe it. But I guess I want to put out there that I think it's a loss to the district and the town and the community to not be taking an opportunity to put solar on a large flat roof when we're redoing the roof. But even if I understand the cost considerations in making that choice, I still think it's a loss given our goals and the tight operating budgets that solar might help deflect.
So Mandy, I have a question because I can capture that in our report so the council, anyone who didn't hear that discussion. But my understanding, having listened to it, is this $10 million. If to make a roof that was built before the thought of putting solar on it, the whole structure of the top tier, not just the current roof, it takes a lot of extra to allow solar to be on it, unless you're going to put holes in the new roof. And if you put holes in the new roof, you deteriorate the capacity of the new roof to last for a really long time. So even this little small piece, MSBA just wants us, it's like a token piece to be solar ready. That little piece is a lot more expensive than the rest of the roof. So I can listen to the tape again, but that was an explanation when people pushed for, it's not, the whole roof isn't solar ready, as opposed to the new building that we're building, the elementary school building. The whole roof was constructed with the idea that it would have solar arrays on top. And some of it has a slant that's perfect for it. So it was reinforced in a way that it doesn't affect the integrity of the roof to put a solar array there. So Mandy, I think trying to capture that, because this 10 million would be considerably higher, and it's being voted on by MSBA like in the next week or so, to move this forward. Yeah.
Like I said, I understand and I get it, and I'm not going to oppose this project because it doesn't have it. And part of that understanding is the MSBA wouldn't cover the increased costs
They don't cover
doing
this.
the solar, which is also a problem with the MSBA, right? Um, so I get it, but I don't think we should ignore that that issue. I guess that was why I was stating that we
So-
shouldn't put our heads in the sand and say, oh, we didn't even ask the question about solar. We know it's not doing it. We understand why, and it is a sad that we can't, sort of thing.
So I'll write a paragraph to make sure that was part of both the school committee discussion, but also ours, to explain why this doesn't have that element in it. Any other questions while Shannon is with us?
I have some
And thank-
comments, but not questions.
Okay, so Shannon, thank you very much for coming last week when we couldn't meet and being very patient with us for about a half an hour while we waited, and for coming back. And thank you for taking on this project. And I know you've been the person that's been back and forth with MSBA a lot. So thank you on behalf of all of us, but also the students in Amherst. And you can stay if you want, but we can let your screen go dark, or we can say goodbye and thank you to you.
Okay, I am gonna listen in for the next agenda item, so I'll just mute and turn my camera off.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now we're turning to the rest of this, and this is on, in, at least right now, it's on the council agenda for next Monday. So I would be drafting a report with a recommendation. So that means we do need to take a vote. So Mandy,
That's actually part of my comments. I actually do not want to recommend that the council vote this before the MSBA votes. So I would like our motion to recommend that the council vote this, I guess, after it's heard what the MSBA vote is. I recognize what the school district and Shannon has said about it's very rare to get to this process and not then be given the grant. But given our finances and the conversation and mention we've had, I don't want to say I wouldn't recommend borrowing 10 million if there is no MSBA grant, but I would definitely need more numbers before I could make that recommendation, because there's a lot of other things that we'd have to really look at and how it would fit into a capital plan. If it's a full 10 million, and so Amherst is paying 7.8 million instead of approximately 3 million out of our capital plan. I feel comfortable, given the necessity of this project, that if the MSBA pays it 60 some percent, that we can find that we will fit the 3 point whatever million into our capital plan. But I would be much more comfortable knowing that when we're voting as a council, that money has been agreed upon, instead of the vote is outstanding. And since we have the time, since we have 60 days from September 23rd, I think we can hold off, and I would like to hold off on a council vote until November 3rd instead of next week on the 20th, I guess is what it would be.
when does MSBA meet on this, Shannon? The exact date?
She said the 27th or 28th or 29th, that week.
So let me just ask in terms of that comment. I mean, we could draft a report and that this is the recommendation, but that we're recommending that the council don't vote on it until after, so it's really ready to go. And that's an option and a suggestion, because it would also show the MSBA that Amherst is ready to do this. But we're just waiting for MSBA to, so we could, I can't even imagine, you can help with the way we would write the motion, but we don't vote on this, but we don't vote this motion until after the MSBA has met.
I mean, I think
would one be, we would, one way of signaling that the town that's going to be the Lord share is, the council is poised to take a vote on it.
yeah, I think it's a simply, whenever we make our motion to recommend, it's recommend that the council, authorize this borrowing as long as the, but wait to vote, authorize the borrowing once MSBA money is guaranteed or something, I don't think the language is that hard for our recommendation. Yeah, and I agree. I think it would be good for the MSBA to see that we will that the recommendation's there as long as you guys give us the money. I just think, like I said, if they don't, and we've already authorized, the school district can borrow the 10 million if all the 4 towns have authorized it. And I'm not prepared to say we can fit that into our capital plan right now. That's not to say I would say no to that at that point, but I'm definitely not ready to say we could definitely fit a $7.8 million roof borrowing in our operating our capital plan. And so I'm just not prepared to say either way, let's do it.
So any other comments? And then I have the draft motion. This is a really long draft motion. And as Shannon said, when we, just before we convened, called to order, this language was given to the district as the language that the town should. So we're adding some additional words, but that Amherst is voting as on a share of this, with all of this stuff coming ready from the MSBA, which the MSBA has these disclaimers way toward the bottom, but this was wording that was provided to the district. And can everyone, should I make it bigger? Let me.
I just want to chime in. I confirmed it is October 28th that they will be voting. That's the
Okay. Okay. So is that large enough for people to see this wording? All I did from what Shannon sent to us is it said recommended to the town, so that the town, and now I put the word Amherst in there. And there may be another place where we have to put the word Amherst rather than the town, yeah, which the, which.
Yeah, I think it seems to make sense. I mean, as opposed to like having some contingency clause in there, just wait for them to vote on it, right?
Okay.
And for the MSBA to vote on it, and then we can vote on it.
So before I make a motion, then Mandy, can you recommend words that would go with this?
I actually think it would be cleaner to do 2 motions.
Okay.
One that's this wording, that we recommend the council that, all of that. And then a second motion that says the finance committee recommends that the council not vote on X recommendation until after the MSBA makes its decision on October 28th or something. Until after the MSBA meets on October 28th. Or in something like until the MSBA meets on October 28th and the MSBA funding is secure or something. I don't know. I think 2 motions is cleaner.
Agree.
Does that work? Finance Committee recommends the council not vote on this recommendation until the MSBA meets on October 28th and the grant is secured?
Yeah.
Okay. And so then my second would be, do we vote on motion 1 first and then motion 1 second? In
Yeah,
which
I
case,
think we vote the big one first.
okay. So is everyone who's here ready to vote? Or do we have any more comments?
Just one comment for the report.
Yep.
Just make sure you mention that there is the $3 million outstanding loan for this same project, essentially, of which about $500,000 has been used. And that we have received assurances that if this borrowing is authorized by all four towns, the regional school committee will rescind that portion of the prior borrowing authorization that has not been used.
Yep. Yep. I had that in my notes, but now I have it in my notes again. So that's great. No,
Just for
no,
the
it's
report.
no, it's great. Because again, this is what we heard during the school committee, regional school committee meeting on the discussion on why Shannon originally had both motions there, but she pulled one off the table saying it's better to do this after we've secured the bigger amount and then take it off the table. And Shannon, if you can just, I'd have to go back and listen to the tape, but if you can send me, we've spent some amount of that. And I thought I remembered about $250,000, not $500,000. So the rescission is not a full 3, I don't think.
Yep, and really quick, so it is we had already borrowed 255,000, drew down those funds, but we had to spend more of those funds, which are being borrowed, for the design costs of this before this authorization was completed. So it'll be a rescission of so it's 3 million, just call it for a flat number, but not the exact number, 400. So it'll rescind about 2.6 around.
Okay, that's perfect. That gives me just the detail I need. And I can use the word about, so we're not saying we know we'll get that amount. So does that, okay, so again, are we ready to take a vote on this? In which case I will make a motion. Let me see if I can get back to my screen. I enlarged faces so I can see it. Oh boy. Okay. Here's the motion, and people can see it on the screen and understand why it is long as it is. I move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Council that Amherst appropriate a portion of the amount of $10,024,016 as determined by the regional agreement for the purpose of paying the costs of Amherst Pelham Regional Middle School roof replacement project, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto the project, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve an asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program, and for which the town may be eligible for a grant from the MSBA, Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, said amount to be expended under the direction of the Amherst Pelham Regional School District. To meet this appropriation, Amherst Pelham Regional School District is authorized to borrow said amount under MGL Chapter 44 or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The town, and I guess I changed this to Amherst, acknowledges that the MSBA grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and any project costs that the town incurs in excess of any grant approved by and received by the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town, provided further that any grant that the town may be received from the MSBA for the project shall not exceed the lesser of 61.95% of the eligible approved project costs as determined by the MSBA, or 2, the total maximum grant amount determined by the MSBA.
Second.
That is, and we have and Mandy second. Okay, so if there's no further comments on this, I will go through for a vote, and for Joe, where you haven't been on, you all indicate whether you support the motion or not. So Andy
So yes.
and Counselor Haneke,
Aye.
And Kathy is a yes with 2 counselors absent. Joe
I support the motion.
and Tom.
I support.
So both resident members support. So it is unanimous with 2 counselors absent. And just so people know, Bernie has officially resigned. I don't know whether he's officially, but he has told me he is resigning from the committee. His position has been open for a while. So we have both resident members here. Thank you all, and thank you, Shannon. So now turning to motion number 2. I move that the Finance Committee recommends that the council not vote on, I have to make my screen big different. On this recommendation until the MSBA meets on October 28th and the grant is secured. Ignore this stuff.
I'll second that motion.
Are we ready to vote on that motion? Any other comments? It sounds like we are fine. So going around the room, I'm doing it in the order of my screen. It's easier for me. Andy,
Yes.
Kathy is a yes. Mandy,
Aye.
Joe,
I support the motion.
and Tom.
I support.
Okay, it is unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes the discussion on the middle school roof. So the other items on the agenda were continuing our effort to be planning in advance. I did from not last week, but the other 2 weeks, collected the questions that we wanted to see if we could get some additional information. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Let me just figure out how I do that. Stop share. Okay. Okay, so I had submitted the questions that we'd come up with for the schools and for the town manager, and I included the replies to both of those. From the schools, we got current enrollment, as of the date we asked for elementary, middle, and the middle schools, but they're not at a point yet to provide us the additional information we asked for. For the town, just so everyone knows, the audit committee I put on the agenda will be the 21st. The audit committee will be the 28th. They weren't going to be ready by the 28th until the 21st. And all the other questions we asked of the town are pending the arrival of Sean Magnano and the comptroller. So we asked about what is the status of our reserves, when will we know about the closing of the current year, the past year, we will get fourth quarter, and some of the other questions on health insurance, he doesn't know yet, but the word is that it's going to be in double digits, so it's not going down again. Paul separately said there is some discussion with pensions, whether the pension draw can stay low the way it was for the recent year, but he doesn't have that amount yet. And some of this will be presented in financial indicators where they're hoping to have some of that information, and that's on November 3rd. It's the council meeting that Monday night. So both the schools and the town said we haven't been dependent on large amounts of federal grants, so yet there's not a disruption of budgets from the federal side. And what else were and both of them said, we made an attempt to say, what if nothing else happens with union contracts? What's the underlying increase in labor costs with labor force fringes? And both said they're unable to say that right now. And part of that is contracts are open. So just getting a sense, if nothing changed, expenses would be going up 4 or 5%. We don't have those numbers. So those questions were all questions we'd come up with that we thought knowing some things in advance would help with the guidelines. And we got small pieces of information, and the answers are posted in the packet. So I have a couple questions while people ponder what I've just said. We have a meeting on the books for next week, which would be unusual, but it was because of last week's cancel. And right now, I don't have any agenda items for that week. We're not going to get new information from the town. I haven't heard of any financial orders. And so it's a question on whether we just want to wait until the 28th meeting. And Paul's memo said that they might have some information by the 28th because the finance director starts this coming week. And I will stop talking. So I've updated you on the information that we have. And then one other suggestion for those of us who have been on guidelines, we don't have to write as long a document as we've been writing. You know, we can get more quickly to the big questions, which are, you know, the equal shares or not, equal increases or not, what's the allocation to capital, and maybe a few other words, but we don't have to write as long a document. Those are going to be the big questions that are that are going to drive this operating budget. And then the other piece we talked about use of, to the extent certified cash comes in with extra that we can allocate. Do we want to weigh in at all on how that can be allocated? And we haven't in the past talked about reserves. And I raised on the capital reserve, one thing we could talk about is allocating some of that capital reserve to next year's capital budget for DPW building and or roads. You know, it's called a capital reserve. Should we start spending it? So these are potential areas that the guidelines could focus on and be less long on other areas. So that's just my thought of, we don't have a lot of meetings to talk about guidelines, but if we narrow what we're talking about in the document, we can focus on those areas. So that's my report on where we are, which is not a lot more information than we had in August or in early September, other than indicators. And the indicators is the first level of projections on revenue. So Mandy, you had asked on, we came in lower with the hold on assessments that aren't, you know, on property taxes that aren't paid. And Paul didn't have an answer for that, how well as that had worked, but he said so I think it was the assessor is out of the office right now. You know, I mean, it was a series of, there's a staff person who could help answer that question, but they're not here right now. But those are all things in terms of revenue projections that we raised a year ago and wanted to find it, and we made some adjustments on it. So I will throw it open. So my big thing was like looking forward, do we want to have a meeting next week or not? And then, you know, I've given you the meeting schedule. And right now, all the future meetings with the exception of the November 12th, where that's a Wednesday, will be at 10 in the morning to accommodate Alicia Walker, who has a class conflict if we meet at 2. So I posted the agenda with the time change on those meetings, but really nothing was changed on that other than the time. Mandy.
Yeah, looking back to my notes from the first time where we generated these questions, it looks like, you know, we asked some of those questions about functional areas and estimated budget needs, and, you know, external factors, right? And we've got some of those answers. And those questions were going to go to what year-over-year increases we're going to provide and whether they should be separate and all. So I'm not sure. We've got the answers, but I'm not sure until we have financial indicators, we can have the actual discussion on that one. But it's good to have some of the guesses regarding each of the functional areas. If we want to have a discussion before financial indicators, I think the biggest thing that is ripe for discussion that we could discuss was when we talked about, there's always in the last number of budget guidelines, there's been a do not consider a Prop 2.5 override to support the budget. And we had talked about, should we consider it? And the way Paul worded it was, should there be a conversation under what circumstances would it be rational to ask for an override? And so I think that's one that could be had before financial indicators. I think most of the other discussions, we really do need to see the estimates that are coming in, no matter how bad we all think they are, until we actually see how bad they are. we can't really discuss. But I think that's one where we could discuss the circumstances under which finance might recommend to the council to put in the budget guidelines whether to seek an override or not.
So you're suggesting maybe that, yeah, I just want to raise, so it's a question of maybe that's on the 21st. The other thing we said, could we meet with a couple key town heads? And Paul was questioning what the useful use of that was. And so he didn't say sure. And so we don't have that scheduled. The other thing that's not on the list of questions from us, but it was raised, actually, it was raised way back in the summer, is we don't know yet what's the schedule on when the debt exclusion for the school will start to show up in property taxes. And we don't know with the Jones proceeding what that debt service line will look like. And Paul said he thinks he could be prepared to talk about that on the 28th. So we could both have we could have the auditor's report, but that Sean would be back and we could be talking about those two pieces. And that relates to the capital budget, Mandy, those, and also what the taxpayers are going to see when on the school side is a tax issue. When are you going to see a little note in your property taxes that this now includes this amount? And for any of you who didn't look at the budget for this year in terms of that line, the school has started to show up for FY26 at about $2 million in debt payments. So that is, we might have already had the cash to pay some of that, or it's being drawn out and something, but because it hasn't yet hit property taxes as that extra amount to pay for the school. And when we were financing the school, voting on it, we were told the larger amounts wouldn't hit for several years, a few years after construction started. It wasn't an immediate that you're going to see it. So Mandy, I had asked those, and Paul said he thought they could be prepared to talk about that on October 28th, but he wouldn't be ready on October 21st. He doesn't have the staff to respond to those.
Yeah, and that brings up the good point of, even if we wanted to have a discussion on the 21st, if that's basically the day Sean starts, would even a discussion on circumstances where we might want to seek an override be hugely useful without information from our finance department, right? And so is there a way we can fit it all in on the 28th? I know we've got a hard deadline or stoppage day that day because of the ribbon cutting at Centennial, I believe, that's supposed to start at noon, I think. So we're already tight timed that day.
Well, here's one possibility. I don't know whether people are willing to. So I think we're leaning toward October 21st isn't a good use of our time, and Sean won't be ready to fully engage, and we shouldn't take up his time. He's going to have to hit the road running. We could potentially start the meeting a bit earlier on the 28th if people's schedules, because it's due to start at 10 in the morning. I told the audit committee knows that's the time. Elisha Walker is the reason we switched from 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock, and I can double check whether she can actually make 10 in the morning, because everyone else had it. So I just don't know, Mandy, what you said. I mean, if we have a hard stop at noon and we start at 10, the auditors we have to read and have a conversation about the audit report. And it is also, we haven't yet posted the closeout for FY24. And that's part of this audit report. We've been waiting for the final financial report from not this recent year, but from a year ago. So it's important that we get through that. Andy.
Just a reminder that October 28th in the morning is the morning that it conflicts with the Fiscal Policy Committee.
Right. Right, and it's a day that Paul had already said he can't be there. So, but your conflict is all day long on the 28th, or is it just the
No,
morning?
it's only in the morning.
It's only in the morning.
And it is an extremely important meeting because it is the meeting where we will finalize the the recommended fiscal policy resolution that ends up in January before the membership. And I have been pressing, and I can't press if I'm not there, that they consider a new section that I've drafted or redrafted the section on state-owned pilot.
Could everyone who's on the screen, and we're missing Bob Hagner and Alicia, if we switched back to 2 o'clock, could everyone make 2 o'clock on the 28th?
So 2 o'clock would be lots better for me. I have a conflict between 10:30 and 11-ish on the
Well,
28th.
we won't, the short answer is we won't have a quorum at 10 o'clock. So let's put it this way, I will reschedule to 2 and let Paul know that the audit committee should just think of 2 o'clock. And I believe Bob is back this week. He will be back by the 28th, so I'll just let him know. And I'll tell Alicia we had to do this to make sure we had a quorum. I mean, we can't meet without a quorum, and it would really, it would throw everything off to not be able to meet with the auditors.
I'm
So-
free at 2 o'clock on the 28th, Kathy.
Great, and
So,
Joe?
yep, I'm in.
Okay, so I don't even have to poll everyone then. We are switching the meeting to 2. Thank you, Mandy, for raising it. And I forgot, Andy, that you had said that. And Paul said he couldn't do the 28th for the same reason. It's the MMA. And as long as Sean can be there, Paul doesn't have to be there. We have to have somebody there to come in with the auditors. So anything else while it's 3:13. So is there anything else that we need to address today? I'm not seeing any hands.
I guess that the one I was trying to think of it would be helpful to know on when we get to the actual discussion about the guidelines about any information that you could provide us from the long-term capital plan about the advisability of going to 10% or whether there had been things that had been postponed in the prior year that would drive that. A lot of that factor of how much we need to recommend for capital. We really need to have recommendations from our representatives on JCPC.
Okay. And as people know, we went down by a small percent this year, and somehow miraculously it didn't result in a project being pushed off because our finance director re-estimated debt service for one of the lines, so there wasn't a need. But there were some projects. Yes, so I understand what you're saying, and so I think in addition, as part of that is what's the difference between 10 and 10.5 in terms of dollars? And if we were moving some of the reserves in, so right now, anyone who looks at the out years, DPW starts appearing, assuming that we had financed it, as a fairly substantial amount of money. If we started pulling some of the capital reserve in, that would mean less of a draw. But the other side of it is we had a capital plan that was not in balance after 2 years. It was running a deficit, and the big issue was vehicles. We were pushing off all vehicle purchases, period. And so that's catching up with us. So I understand what you're asking, Andy. What decisions do we make, and what does the 5-year plan look like? And if it were, so I would be happy to resurrect. Bob was also on that committee, just on what we did to make it balance in the current year, and then looking out several years. So I think that we have 2 meetings scheduled now in November, and if we focus, we could potentially get through a decent draft of guidelines. And there is a budget coordinating group meeting somewhere in the middle of all of this, Mandy, and you're part of that. So you'll be able to report back on that meeting. It's in, I know it's in early November I think after indicators.
It's set for November 13,
Okay.
which is after the November 12th finance meeting,
Yep. Okay. But before the
but before the 18th.
But before the 18th. So I said it'll be right in the middle and
It's between those two, yeah. So that would give us a time to talk on the 12th, given the indicators on the 3rd, for me to be able to go into BCG with some finance discussions.
So thank you, everyone. I mean, this was a rather intense, but I thought productive meeting. And if I don't see any other hands up, I make a motion to adjourn. Is there a
Second.
And I will just go around the room. Andy,
Yes.
Kathy is a yes. Counselor Haneke,
Aye.
Joe,
I
Tom.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 3:17. Congratulations. Thanks, everyone. See
Thank
see
you.
you in 2 weeks. There is no meeting next week. Okay.
thanks, Kathy.